So, I mean, is this the actual world that we live in, or is this a made-up world?
Yes, it's a made-up world, but with consequences of the world we live in. In other words, I wanted to discuss problems that I thought were universal to certain parts of the world, but I didn't want to give them names. I did not want to say this megalopolis is Nairobi or it is Lima. I wanted to just say it's a megalopolis where the very rich and the very poor live side by side, which could be in so many parts of the world. You know, I don't want to say this is a Papuan uncontacted tribe or it's a Central Republic of Congo uncontacted tribe. It's just an uncontacted tribe. You know, and this would allow me to just get at a universal issue that affects all uncontacted tribes, which is deforestation, encroachment of land, you know, which are very real problems for pretty much anyone who happens to live in these contexts now. So I want to give specificity to a problem that's a global problem, but I didn't want to give it a national voice. So yes, it is both a national and non-national narrative.
So some of these voices that you showed us today, are
Yeah.
they based on people you actually met, or did you invent them?
Yes, it's largely invention. So in the same way I imagined these four regions, I decided to imagine, it used to be hundreds of narratives. I just had hundreds of vignettes that came. I actually, after that trip to Croatia, I just had to sit, after that trip from Dublin with the Split, I had to sit on a metal little bench and write for hours, and hundreds of vignettes came to me. And over time it became 60 narratives, but when I was trying to shape the narratives, I had this book, my Somyaka, who was she lives in Germany. She's lived like 30 years in Germany, but she was at least born in India, and she gave me this wonderful book, you know, with all these maps on it, and she gave it to me, and I took this notebook, and I just started writing, you know, the narrative. Like, this is the shaman. This was what her mother did. This is what her father did. This is how many siblings she had. This is how she became the shaman. Or, you know, the peanut vendor. This is where he was born. He was born in this slum in this part of the city. His father and mother did this, and this is why he became like that. This is how many siblings he had. And this was his relation. I just imagined them from day one to the day of the narrative. And then from that, I started telling this story based on what I thought their psychology was like. Anyone else?
That must be such a challenge to write a book from so many different mindsets, and you're just one person,
Yes.
right? So it's almost like acting, where you constantly have to change characters.
Yes.
Yourself.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, inside of me, it's you can feel like you're many people in love. You can feel like you're just a world inside of just one human body. And yes, it is like acting a little bit, but it's also, I guess it's the talent of writing, or the talent of being a fiction writer, is how to imagine psychologies that are so difficult and so different from each other, and to create art from that space, and justice and authenticity.
And were all these stories written in one place? Like,
No. No, I wrote the book over many years. I started in 2011 and I finished in 2017, when I spent 2 years trying to get it published. I spent a lot of the time forming it in Cusco in Peru and Manu Jungle in Peru. I really wrote it in Cusco in Peru, Yogyakarta in Indonesia, Malindi in Kenya. Malindi in Kenya is probably where the best draft of the book came. That's when in Kenya I really wrote a really good draft of it. And then maybe Yogyakarta as well. But I did pieces of it a little bit everywhere. But yes, those are the places which really influenced the book and yes, made it what it is. Yeah, tell me.
Can you talk about the publication process? Because you mentioned that they kind of made you hone in on some of the
Oh yeah,
narratives.
well, are you talking about the way of finding a publisher, or the act of how they edit you?
The second part.
Yeah. Well, so basically I went through rounds of, on one side trying to get the book published, and the other side trying to, I worked with an editor, and I think over time it just became clear that the book, I had this big book, like 64, I think one of the better drafts was when it was at 64 narrators, and it was going to be a huge, it was 100,000 words. It was supposed to be like a big epic book, with a huge weight to it. And the problem is, however, because I was trying to show a multitude of characters interconnecting, and they're tangentially related. The question is, why do they have to exist in a book in the first place? Because people who work in the world of fiction are surprisingly close-minded sometimes. That's something you learn as you try to get published, is you just realize how close-minded the publishing world and the literary world can be. And so I had to cut it down, and it became over time, I just really had to choose the most essential voices, the ones who were the least repetitive, the ones who were the most unique and singular, and the ones I could not let go of, and it became 16 people. But publishing requires a lot of editing, and I think they also had a point. Like, it did become a better book in certain ways, and that it's more organized now, and it's more like easy to follow. There's less work you have to do, and it's less characters as well. But it became a different book, and I don't always know if I like that process.
Do you want to tell us about the cover?
Yeah, sure. So this is my cover.
She's waiting for it.
She's excited to say this is my cover. I originally,
At first I thought it was a turnip. And then
someone else said that. Someone else said that.
Then I realized it was like smoke factories.
Yes. Yeah, it's not a turnip. Look at it clearly. It is an earth that is bleeding and also fuming at the same time. See? Bleeding and fuming.
Yeah, I think it's the color scheme that made me think it was a turnip.
You might also be very hungry for Texan food. So, originally, when I was working with my publisher, Iguana Books, we had me and the first cover designer. Well, I wanted someone to design maps for me because I thought we both agreed it would be a really cool idea to have these maps, that would allow for these like abstract imagined regions to have like the weight of real places. So they're like real places in a certain way, because you can at least look at these maps and then use that to imagine them. And then so I talked to some, and they also said that this person will do my cover design. So I had an idea for a cover. I wanted to show the planet Earth and people like in kind of like, I was imagining an oil spill, I was imagining like, industrial disaster, like, fire and smog and all this, from jungles and all this. And then these hands, these invisible hands, like connecting, each other, despite being from these different places, like crossing from different parts of the world and connecting, and holding each other's hand. He designed that, and I still like that image, but a lot of people didn't like it. It was not, some people thought it was very gruesome looking, and it didn't make for a good cover in their opinion. So then a second cover designer, me and the other one had a little bit of artistic differences after that, and then they got a second cover designer who happened to work for the publisher to also do this image, which then ended up having a similar motif to what I was talking about, but now it's a much more visually appealing cover as well. Like it makes for a good cover, and it kind of gets across the point I'm trying to talk about as well.
And what about the title? How do you call that?
Yeah, We of the Forsaken World. So I said it a little bit before you had come. It is about that sentence, "We are the poorest country in the world," which came to me when I was on a bus talking to someone on my way from Dubrovnik to Split in Croatia, and she had said that about her country, Croatia. So "We are the poorest country in the world" is supposed to be kind of, well, that was the original title, and I liked it, but then I realized after some people had made some comments about it that it's a little demeaning to people who happen to be of poor countries. And then I thought to think of a better title, We of the Forsaken World. So the Forsaken World also gives that same idea, places that are kind of left out of the process of being part of the world. And it adds a biblical feel, because forsaken is a very biblical or poetic word. And then I purposely try to play with the typography as well. Like it's supposed to be, it's uppercase, but it's supposed to be also lowercase in the proper way it's written. And then ellipses, because it's supposed to be we like people who happen to live in these forsaken worlds, ... and then narrative. So despite being from this place and is supposedly a forsaken world, I'm like this. So despite also being from this place, I'm like this, and a chain of these voices speaking out from these positionalities.
It's a great title.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I know it.
Well, can I ask you a personal question?
Yeah, sure, go ahead. I like personal questions too.
So,
I'm an open book.
you've lived in 18 countries.
Cities, but yes.
Oh, in 18
Maybe
cities.
12 countries if we change it to that. Because I've lived in a lot of places in India and the US
Okay.
and Europe, so that changes the
And
number.
are you able to do that because you can work from anywhere, or
Yes.
like how do you do that?
So let me explain the finances of what I had done. So first, I studied a year abroad in Spain. That was from 2010 to 2011, and that's when I had this feeling like I really want to be a global citizen, kind of live by traveling and writing. My father, of course, being a typical South Indian, did not like this idea at all. he wanted me to go and do the right thing in his book, which was to go and get a degree and to do that stuff. But he had, me and my parents have we had a lot of problems from this because I'm also very different in so many other ways. And I really want to do it. And I just said, you know what, I'm going to do it. Even if you don't support me, I'm just going to do it by myself. And I decided to go to Latin America. I took my savings. I had like $4,000 at the time in savings, and I took it. I went to Latin America, and I found a job teaching English online. And I started teaching English for virtual companies. I did one for 3 years called Open English, and I'd be paid like $8 an hour, and I'd be teaching English to beginners who were Portuguese language speakers, and we would, I would make really. By American standards or most global standards, I was making a fairly paltry wage, but still for a lot of like poor countries, like if you're earning $8 an hour, you have a pretty good wage. So that was enough, and then I got to another company that I earned about 10 euros an hour, and that was for 2 years. And I taught a year in Shanghai. I taught some time in Moscow and Mumbai, and now I'm a grad student in Malvern. But yes, teaching online is how I earned my income and traveled. I would be one place teaching, then I'd go somewhere else when I felt like it. But I'd always be teaching, so I could still make my income.
That's so fascinating because I have read that at least this was about reading with China, because a lot of people go to China to teach English to kind of live in a foreign country, kind of explore the culture.
Yeah.
And I've heard that there's a pretty gruesome selection process where they want to prioritize people with American accents.
Of course, yes,
And
they do.
so did you experience any of that?
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, that's interesting. Well, first of all, my accent changed a lot while traveling, for better or for worse. With myself, yeah, that is a huge space of discrimination. I felt it more in Russia than China, interesting enough. In China, I had a lot more, I think, leeway because there they think a lot more about passport as well. So as long as I'm an American passport holder, so from that space, it was very easy for me to travel. Whereas in Russia, I did feel like when I would try to get jobs, people were looking down on my accent a little bit. But
Yeah.
they were, and Russians, like Indians, also very blunt. So they'll just tell you what they're thinking, which is all right. But it's yes. Though I would say that I did have more discrimination and this feeling like, can you really be an English teacher?
Yeah, interesting.
And I can. I have a very good command of English, but.
Right.
And also in China, they look a lot on skin color. But the thing with China is that I taught in a college. I did not. So for a lot of those jobs, they're looking at people who are white and from these richer, like America, US types of, UK types of places, because they're also trying to imprint that American or UK or whatever accent to their like little children. Whereas I was teaching at a college, I was teaching also not really English. I was teaching English, but I could do whatever I want in the domain of teaching English.
Oh, okay.
So it was much freer.
Very cool. Yeah, the story I was reading was from an Irish woman who, clearly Ireland, native speaker of English. She was like, no, they didn't want me because they're like, you have a weird English accent. We want somebody with like a British or American English accent. But some of the people I've met in China who have studied English at those schools, their accents are still fucked up because they get Australian people, British people, Americans all teaching with different accents.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, fundamentally, as long as you're understandable, the accent should not matter. But
Right.
I think that, and it's funny because Ireland is one of the few countries that is allowed to go into China. They allow Irish people to go there because there's only 5 passports that are allowed to teach English in China. Actually,
Oh, okay.
they are UK, US, Ireland, Australia, maybe New Zealand and South Africa. I think it's 6, maybe it might be 6. But yes, otherwise you can't get a job at all teaching English in
Gotcha.
China.
That's fascinating.
So at least I made that round.
You picked up a lot of languages too.
Yeah, I speak 12 languages currently.
Are you fluent in all of them?
No, I'm not. I can manage though. My best language is English. My second best language is Kannada, which is my mother tongue. It's from you might know, it's from South India. Then there's a Spanish, which, Spanish is like the proper second language of the US almost. So I picked it up while I was studying here, and then I studied abroad in Spain. And Portuguese is like a variant of Spanish basically, so it's very easy to pick up. Then I spent a year in China, so I'm pretty good at Chinese. Like not so good, maybe 3 pegs down from my Spanish, but pretty decent. I wrote a book as well in Mandarin.
Oh, wow.
And my Turkish is also pretty okay, but it's lost fluency because I'm not in a Turkish-speaking environment anymore. Maybe if I went there, I would regain fluency, and then I'd be like decent. And then I'm bad. Like I can manage basic conversation, but with a lot of stuttering, a lot of exertion from the person listening to me in French, Russian, Hindi, Arabic, Indonesian, and Japanese.
Wow.
But I can manage, but that other person has to be really patient and let me
Right. So what's
think
your
out my
methodology?
sentences. I'm sorry?
So what's your methodology? Like, do you pick up like a book and learn, or do you just walk around and try and talk to people?
So firstly, like usually in the preliminary stages, I take a grammar book and I try to study it. Usually I start like a week or two before I go, because I'm also usually in another place where I'm learning another language, so I won't have time before that. Then by the time I'm there, within a month, I will have read that grammar book and I've learned all the basic grammar, the syntax, the rules. And at that time, I'm also talking to native speakers on the bus, in restaurants, you know, and as a solo traveler, I'm alone a lot. So it's a perfect time to just get into conversation with people and, you know, like just like you all might go someplace like close by, like Mexico, and you might just have to start with not como estás, but como estás, right? And you just learn that, like, yo soy, you know, and then over time it becomes yo soy eso. You know what I mean. Like you just have to throw yourself at people and
Right.
try to learn.
Right.
And over 3 or 4 months, I get like to an upper beginner stage. And if I stay for 5-6 months, I get like to like a decent intermediate phase. And if I stay for like a year, then I become still maybe in a decent intermediate stage, but with fluency.
Gotcha. And it helps probably that you stay so long.
Yeah, at least for 5 months to a year is usually my average time and place.
Are the characters in your books moving around?
No, they are very much just local people living their local life, you know, like just a prostitute in a big city or just a waitress in, you know, a tourist town. They're just living their own lives, and the language, just like digitalization, unites them and causes them to move. The language moves, but not them. Just in the same way we have this giant internet right now, this giant web of, the space that is really right now connecting all of us. And we are being connected through the internet right now without ever being consciously aware of the fact that we're being interconnected. But it exists, and it exists without our consciousness, and it connects us as one whole. It creates a wholeness, and I wanted to represent that using maybe 16 parables, or 16 case studies in 4 different regions I imagined.
So, given that your book features a lot of remote locations that are isolated, right, and we, all of us here, don't live in the forsaken parts of the world.
Yes.
So how should we read this book? Should it be kind of like, what's that book? Just Conrad's,
How to talk.
yes, kind of like that, where we're like some foreigner who's going into this place far away that's going to be very different from our world? Or is it supposed to be more like, I don't know, like Gabriel Garcia Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude, which is also like in a tiny little town in somewhere in Central America, which is made up, but like the problems they have are,
Universal.
about, like to that region.
I would say it's more like the second. I think that the book has a very grounding effect in just the raw humanity of the characters, and that anyone from anywhere can look at them and feel like they're part of that person.
Okay.
And the beauty of it is also to show that despite the fact that people are so tied and created through their local land and through their local culture, you can be tied and connected to someone who's very different. You know, like in the same way these characters being blurred, despite being like, you know, the third wife of a chief, you know, in the middle of an uncontacted tribe, and then some prostitute in a big, you know, in a mega city, you know. These two people have fundamentally different lives. We probably never even thought a millisecond about each other, and yet the language is blurring them together because they all share, in the same way we all share Earth, they all share the space of this book, and that is what unites them.
It's a cool idea.
Well, it seems like a great place to stop.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for coming. And I
Thank
think,
you, yes. Thank you
Kiran
for
would
coming.
be happy to sign copies.
Yes, I will. Yes, we'll go over there and we'll sign.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was great.